So it is still morning here. And as I'm looking at the attendees, I see we have many people on various continents. So wherever you are, whether it is morning, noon, or night, thank you so much for joining us for National Mentoring Month, week 3. I know there are a few people who will still join in, and my colleagues will admit them as they join, but I want to get started because I know we have a lot of goodness here today. Welcome to week 3 of our interviews with longstanding mentoring pairs. Before I introduce our guests, a couple matters of housekeeping. My colleagues Angela McGuire and Michelle Hancock are here. If any of you attendees have any technological questions, they are your go-to people. Also, stay tuned until the end because Angela is going to be picking a random winner to give a copy of one of our books away to. So stay tuned for that till the end. And Aaron's raising his hand.
I want that.
All right, Aaron. Ask and ye shall receive. Yeah. So let me introduce you to Aaron and Rubina because I know we're in for a great conversation here. I just want to say one thing about the genesis of this interview series. Several years ago, I have a cousin who did a photojournalistic essay on long-standing married couples, talking about the power of their relationship. And as I was thinking about what do we do to honor National Mentoring Month, I was thinking about all of the mentors and the mentees that I get the privilege to get to know and how so many of you have so many bits of wisdom that not just I can learn from, but others in the mentoring community have learned from. So very, very excited to be talking with Aaron and Dr. Malik here today. So let me tell you who they are. So Aaron is the Audit and Assurance Senior Manager at Deloitte & Touche. He's a board member for Tackle Tomorrow, which is a not-for-profit that seeks to abolish illiteracy within the South Dallas community. He's the proud father to the baby girl, 18-month-old, who sleeps through the night. And he loves to travel in his free time. And I know he met Dr. Malik at Morehouse, which is his alma mater. Dr. Rubina Malik is a scholar, a strategic advisor, a thought leader, and a mentor. She's a champion of career sponsorship and leadership development and an expert in helping organizations enhance the engagement, retention, and promotion of diverse candidates. She has worked with competitive edge driving organizations from startups to Fortune 500 global organizations. And she's a TEDx speaker. If you have a chance to Google her and watch her TEDx talk, it is a real treat. And Dr. Malik and I met several years ago. We were saying about 5 years ago at a conference. So I remember her commitment to mentoring and know that she will have lots of wisdom to share here today. So welcome, Aaron. Welcome, Rubina. So happy to have you here.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So how about if you start us off? Aaron, how did you and Dr. Malik first meet?
I met Dr. Malik in her class. I took her marketing class, Principles to Marketing. And from day one, I could tell that she had just a dynamic personality, and she really cared about her students. And a moment in that class when I was actually on my cell phone, on my mobile phone, and there was a rule that there's no mobile devices that you can use during the time of class, but I actually was doing it because there was something, I forgot, there was something that was going on and I needed to check my phone. So I checked my phone and she called me out in front of everybody and made an example, I would say, out of me. At Morehouse, I was in the business department, one of the top students. And so, the fact that she held me accountable, I think, set the stage for people in the classroom. So I went to her office hours afterwards to have a conversation. And then from there, that's when the relationship kicked off.
Awesome. So you took him on as a mentee despite the abuse of the cell phone rule. How did you decide to enter into a mentoring relationship?
I don't know if he'll ever forgive me for that.
I won't.
Well, how did you decide to enter into a mentoring relationship?
Well, I mean, for me, there's several ways that the relationships kind of happen, right? Like one is organically, one is kind of like thoughtfully. So in this case, and then let me just say that the third one, so it's organically, thoughtfully, and then the other person asks, as well. So in Aaron and I's case, like, so sometimes what happens for me is I see someone or I see one of my students and I see potential, I see something in them that maybe they're not seeing in themselves, and I want to help cultivate that. And I wanted to take Aaron to the next level in his leadership. He was engaged in the department. He was one of the top students, like as he mentioned. And I felt like he could go higher, right? Like there's this plateau that we're on. And so I just kind of took him on, from the whole cell phone. He's never gonna. I can imagine that my eulogy, he's gonna be like, well, that time she called me out on the cell phone. But it really, like I think, like he said, it's kind of set a precedence, and also just let him know, like for me, it's like this is the level I'm gonna hold you accountable for because I care about you, not because not for anything else. And as well as the fact that, the students were looking and they knew that he was a favorite, and, how was I going to handle this? And so it was my integrity, as well. So I think it taught in the relationship, the integrity was there, the holding you accountable is there, and I see you bigger than you might see yourself is there. So I think those were just, for me in this situation, were just the right ingredients to take him on as a mentee.
Yeah, amazing. Also, probably the fact that you saw him, right? Meaning like part of calling him out was saying, I see you.
Yeah.
Right? Which is actually, yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
I was just going to say, and Dr. Malik, you're going to have to correct me on this statement, but you had a statement in the class that you told us that one day where you saying you want somebody to play the music of your heart, something to that effect, where essentially I see you, I acknowledge you, I care about you, and I want what's best for you. And that left an indelible impact on me as a person, because when you're matriculating through college and you're trying to figure out where do you want to go, how do you want to start your life, and all of the pressures that come along with that, especially as a person of color in society, having somebody acknowledge you for who you are, see you for what you can be, and even though you may not see it at that point in time, talk to you in a way that as though you are already there, so that you're inspired to get to that next level. And Dr. Malik definitely has and continues to do that for me.
I love that. Look, one of the things we know for sure is the way that people start a mentoring relationship really sets the tone for how they continue a mentoring relationship. So I'm curious how in those initial meetings, how did you set the parameters for your mentoring relationship so that it was successful later on?
For me, it was from the start, it was an authentic relationship. So I think mentors, you can have mentors in specific areas of your life, professionally, personally, and also in stages of your life, whether, new parent or trying to buy a home, or trying to start extracurricular activities outside of your work, so to get extra income. For me, though, in this particular situation, this was a mentor that was in all facets of life. So I think in our first conversation, Dr. Malik asked me, what's my purpose? What drives me? What are the things that I'm passionate about? And how does that play in all aspects of my life? So I immediately put her in that category of just an individual who will help me navigate both from a personal standpoint and also a professional standpoint. And from there, it's always just been open and candid conversation. The expectation is I can only help navigate you for as much as you are willing to share and contribute in the conversation. So one thing Dr. Malik's really good at is she is very perceptive of my moods and what's going on with me, because sometimes I can really shut down and not really open up. And she's really good at, again, pulling that out of me, but she always will start the conversation with, well, you got to be open and candid with me. And I think the beauty of this mentor-mentee relationship is she's candid with me also about her life. And I think that encourages me to open it up. And I would say that has been the driving force of the evolution of our relationship, is just being candid.
I love that. I love that. Rubina, from your perspective, what did you do to set yourself up, to set you and Aaron up for success in the long run?
Yeah, and well, Lisa, we know, like, in you're supposed to have the rules and the expectations and how often you're going to meet and this and that in a formal setting. But we already had a relationship in regards to a professor student relationship, which kind of has a component of mentoring, you could say. So you had those boundaries already set, and then it was just, he would come by, I would take time out, you had office hours, he would come by, and with the office hours, and we would talk and say, hey, what's going on, what do you need? Or if there was something else he needed, he had permission to reach out, say, hey, can I come and see you at this time so we can talk about it. So we set, those parameters, were set. But Lisa, for me is, and I'm like this in any relationship. I like to be open, I like to be candid, and I like to be authentic. But especially with my mentees, as Aaron said, we've known each other. I'm 29 and a half and 0.1, and I think he's older than me. But
I've passed you, yes, I have.
yeah, right. yeah, right. He's actually his birthday, ironically, is 3 days after mine. So we're also Aquarians. But for me, it's also being authentic. So, like, he's been in my life since, I've lost my parents and, made other moves, graduated with my PhD and, all of that. So I make it my business to actually share as well. So, they can be included, and I'm also included in their life, because I'm a grand mentor now. He has an 18-year-old, a beautiful daughter who is my grand mentee, right? And so for me, it's being inclusive, and it's not just how's work. It's like, I want to know him inclusively, so I can support him and whatever he needs. Now, don't get me wrong, come January, it's like, okay, well, do we have our goals for the year? Or like, where do you want to be, and then how can I support you? And also always like, hey, so what book are you reading? What are you doing to take yourself to the next level? So those are always, those will be slipped in somehow, some way, no matter what.
Yeah, I love that. I love the term grand mentee. When you first mentioned it to me, Rubina, I thought you meant Aaron's mentee would be your grand mentee. So that's the next frontier for you, Aaron. You have the grand mentee from the personal side, but the grand mentee from the professional side as well.
Yeah.
Aaron, can you talk a little bit about what was this like as an undergrad to have a professor say to you, what are your goals? I remember, well, it's hard for me to remember back to being an undergrad, but that's not necessarily the first thing that's on your mind as you go into class, right? So talk a little bit about that.
Definitely not. I was taken aback just because you think that there's this separation between you and your professor where, you come into class and you listen to the lesson, then go study, perform well on tests, and move on. And you may have some interactions in the office hours, but to have someone challenge you and say, well, what's your goals? Where do you want to be? And not only ask you, but then hold you accountable. So Dr. Malik, from that initial conversation that we had, and then right afterwards, and the multiple times that we met, it was always, and when I walked away from the conversation, I had a to-do. And I was being held accountable to that to-do. So the next time I came, if I did not get that done or didn't have a response, then it was, well, we don't talk today. Like, please leave. You got to come back with that information. And what it did for me was it pushed me and propelled me to do things both at school. I was the president of some organizations, some that Dr. Malik was the faculty sponsor for, but that put me in position to network with the school's president and be considered one of his ambassadors. And again, this was something that Dr. Malik put inside of me that I wasn't even really thinking about through our conversations and through the objectives that she set for me, and then holding me accountable to those objectives. And so then think about fast forward to where I'm at today in my career, are those same types of conversations that we had, we still have, and it's always back to, okay, what are you doing next? Where's your SMART goals? What is measurable? I'm going to check in with you to make sure you're following through. So as that young student being pushed that way, to me, it was everything, because, if you don't really have it, I mean, you can try to glean from what you see other people are doing, and try the best to your ability to navigate both school and what's next. But when you actually have somebody in your corner challenging you and holding you accountable, that to me took me to the next level. So at first I was taken aback, but then I would categorize it as just kind of having the hunger now, not to the extent of trying to please her, but more so of, here's something she set above me that I'm reaching for, and I want to reach it. So what can I do to get to it?
I love that. How would you say your relationship has evolved over time now that you're not an undergrad or in the same institution anymore?
It's evolved from this. I mean, from the standpoint of being my mentor, she's definitely still a very prized mentor for me, especially with my career aspirations at Deloitte and where I'd like to be in the next 3 to 5 years. I definitely consult with Dr. Malik. I get her input on strategies that I need to implement career-wise to get to that next level, as well as just partner with her on certain things to make sure that I'm building out my resume for the next position that I'm seeking after. But I would say it has evolved into a deep professional relationship. I mean, a personal relationship. I would say from the standpoint of, I consider her like a second mother. And for me, it's more, it has grown beyond the mentor-mentee relationship. It's really a life advisor, someone who is a confidant, and someone who I can talk to about pretty much anything, and know that I'm going to get candid feedback. Like over the last 2 years, I've gone through some things personally that have been very challenging for me. And Dr. Malik has been there. And sometimes she's told me things I didn't want to hear, and has put me in a position like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be on my side, when in actuality she is, right? But she's telling me things that I don't want to hear for me to see the bigger picture and to make adjustments. And so I would say that's where we are today. I see her more as a life confidant, someone that I can lean on in all aspects of my life, and know that she's there for me, that she sees me. Back to that first comment I mentioned earlier about in the classroom, was she sees me for who I am, and she's there for me, and will push me in all aspects of life for me to be the best Aaron that I can be.
I love that. Rubina, can you talk a little bit about how you've benefited from the mentoring relationship?
Well, besides having a grand mentee,
Besides having a grand mentee, yeah.
yeah. So this is something I always, my students, I was like, well, and I think Aaron's, you've said this before too. So I don't have children of my own, Lisa. So, sometimes, sometimes people ask me, and I'm like, no, like, I'm fine. And so in some ways I'm blessed, right? I didn't have to change diapers. I didn't have to be sleep deprived, all those things that we were talking about earlier. And so I get to contribute, and I get to love and nurture. Listen, you know how you parents think about your kids when they're like still 8 years old and they're now 40 something, and they're like, Mom, like, stop babying me. I feel the same way about my mentees. I still think Aaron's 19 when he says his age. I'm like, no, you're not. Like, you're still 19 in my life, in my eyes. And so for me, it's that fulfillment of one, that I make a contribution. It's having a sense of belonging, and having a sense of, like, there's some mutuality in our relationship. Like, he loves me as much as I love him, as a mentor, mentee, and we're out to have each other win. Sometimes he has to call me out on my stuff too. Like, I'm not 99.9% perfect, but that 1%, like he's like, Dr. Malik, come on now. He puts that mirror up, because that's the kind of relationship that we have, right? Like I said, with authenticity. But it really has, it really fills my heart with gratitude and with warmth, to have him as a mentor. as a mentee and to be his mentor. So, and then I also learn things, right? Like, young people know things that they pass on or they talk about. So so I get to benefit from that as well. But the biggest thing is that belonging and that reciprocate of how we feel about each other.
I was going to touch on that too. I was just going to say that to in my mind, and this is what I try to employ in my mentor-mentee relationships, is exposure to different things. One thing that Dr. Malik did early in our relationship when I was still in school was expose me to things that I wouldn't have had on my radar if she didn't. One being this program, the Landmark Forum, that she was a facilitator at, and it's a powerful program that helps you identify stories that you tell yourself, and give you tools and best practices on how to first identify these stories being, for example, because something happened in my life when I was 7 years old, I've internalized that, where it could be somebody yelled at me, and then from that experience, I'll tell myself I'm not good enough. So I'm looking for confirmation of that in different areas or activities or events that happen in my life. And this program gets you to identify, hey, that's a story. It's not real. And what is your possibility? Meaning, what can you create now, knowing that that's a story for you to live and operate and from a different mindset. And she introduced me to that program that was life-changing for me. And, I've met Dr. Malik abroad. I took a sabbatical and I was in the south of France for a few months. And, she met me there. We explored there, and she introduced me to another one of her mentees. And then again, just that constant challenge and pushing and exposure to new and different things. And to me, as a mentor and your mentee wanting to keep viability in that relationship, that exposure to new things and constant challenging that person is something that I think invigorates the mentee and then keeps the lifeblood in that relationship.
That's spectacular. Well, before I let you go,
can I just say, like,
yeah,
one of my favorite memories is that. So I happened to be in France at the same time. He happened to be there, and like literally like at the same time. That was probably one of the most memorable. We got to explore where he was staying on the mountain. Was it a mountain? I think
Ville-France, yeah, Ville-France.
Yeah, I know it was on a hill,
Mhm.
and I wouldn't have gotten to experience that if I hadn't met him. And then I exposed him to some of the things that I explore whenever I go to south of France, and I like to go visit. So it was this mutual, sharing. But that's a memory that you'll always remember, right? So I remembered putting a post up actually just recently, Aaron, because recently it came up, and it said, like, if you can't find your mentor in Atlanta, go to Paris, So, and
that's good advice.
Yeah.
That's good advice. Well, I want to ask you about your advice to new mentors and mentees, but before I do that, just a housekeeping matter. The winner of the book is Solskin Gomez Crow. So Solskin, congratulations. If you would message my colleague Angela directly with your address and which book you'd like, and she can send you the options. One is Bridging Differences for Better Mentoring, which is about creating mentoring relationships across difference and encouraging authenticity. And the other is the 3rd edition of the Mentor's Guide. Be happy to send you a signed copy, and just want to thank you so much for joining. And also, Angela's going to put a link in the chat for everybody. We want to offer a free resource for everybody who's joined, just as a thank you for joining us, mentoring resources for you. So, or is that what we're offering today? Yes, the mentoring resources. So there'll be a link in the chat for everybody as well. So with those housekeeping items, Aaron and Rubina, I want to ask you, what is your advice for a new mentor or a new mentee?
Well, Aaron kind of touched a little bit about it, but one of the things as a mentor what I really want to emphasize to mentors is the opportunity to expose your mentee to different things, whether it's a book or whether it's food or whether it's taking them to an event, inviting them somewhere that maybe they wouldn't have an opportunity to do that, or even if they did, they're meeting somebody new and somebody different and at that event. So I think providing exposure to a mentee is very important, and that could look like many ways. It doesn't have to be an event. And I know for me, like my mentors definitely provide that for me. So I always emulate that because it makes an impact. And the other for me that's really important is to be committed to that relationship and seeing that person bigger than they see themselves. And that to me is very important. Like I see Aaron bigger than he'll ever see himself. And that's how I interact with him. Right? That's how I interact with him. And so the line that he was saying is that, is knowing the song in someone's heart and singing it when they forget.
That's spectacular. Aaron, how about you?
I would just say as a mentee, I would say the tools of success that I found in engaging with mentors is coming to the conversation with questions. First, acknowledging that you see something in that mentor that inspires you, that you admire. And then also to just asking questions and understanding and learning about your mentor. I know that there could be apprehension in introducing yourself for the first time to a potential mentor and trying to establish a relationship, especially if you don't have distinct commonalities or known commonalities at that point in time. But I think really just putting time on that person's calendar, reaching out to that individual, first expressing what you admire about them, what you see in them that inspires you, and then just having questions and going from there and seeing how the relationship evolves. And it may not be instantaneous, but if you stick to it, you may be surprised at how fruitful that relationship can be.
Such sage advice from both of you. We've recorded this webinar, and we'll make sure to share a recording with each of you, but also with the folks who joined and who registered today, so they can remember and rewatch it so that they can learn again. Sometimes it helps to hear things twice. I wish I could write and facilitate at the same time because it's such goodness. So thank you so much, Aaron Brown, Dr. Rubina Malik, for the gift of your time, for your dedication to mentorship and to one another. I can see how transformative it's been, and appreciate you sharing your wisdom with our community. Next week, for the final week of National Mentoring Month, we're going to venture into the world of youth mentoring and talk to Briauna Wills and Brooke Woods, who have a longstanding mentoring relationship through Brianna's organization that she founded called Young Queens in Training, which has helped young women at risk in Baltimore really succeed. So very much looking forward to that. Invite all of you to join us then. Thank you again. Thank Aaron. Thank you, Dr. Malik. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Happy National Mentoring Month.
Thanks for having us.